Daniel Hayes stared at his phone screen in absolute horror. 5 words. Sent to the wrong person. My boss is unbelievably hot. His stomach dropped. The message wasn't meant for his best friend. It had gone directly to Victoria Grant, the CEO of the entire company. The woman whose icy reputation made grown executives nervous. The woman who could end his career with a single word. His phone buzzed. My office. Now. This was it. He was finished. But what Daniel didn't know was that this humiliating mistake was about to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of corporate power and change both of their lives forever. Before we dive into this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever sent a text to the wrong person? Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from, and hit that like button so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into what happened next. The fluorescent lights of the Chicago Metro train flickered as Daniel Hayes slumped against the worn plastic seat, his daughter Lily's head resting on his shoulder. At 7 years old, she'd already mastered the art of falling asleep anywhere, a skill born from years of late-night commutes and a father who worked too many hours. Daniel checked his watch, 9:47 p.m. Another 12-hour day, another evening stolen from the childhood he desperately wanted to give her. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, his best friend since college. Marcus, how's the new boss? Still terrifying? Daniel glanced at Lily, confirming she was asleep, then typed a response he'd been holding in for weeks. Daniel, terrifying doesn't cover it. She's brilliant, ruthless, and honestly, my boss is unbelievably hot. He hit send and immediately felt guilty. Victoria Grant, the 38-year-old CEO, who'd taken over Grant Media 6 months ago, wasn't just his boss. She was a legend in the industry. She'd transformed 3 failing companies before taking the helm of her family's struggling media empire, and she ran the organization with precision that bordered on intimidation. The train lurched. Lily stirred but didn't wake. Daniel's phone buzzed again. But the name on the screen made his blood freeze. Victoria Grant. His heart stopped. His fingers went numb. The train car suddenly felt like it was spinning. No. No, no, no. He opened the message thread with shaking hands, praying he'd misread, praying it was some cosmic joke. But there it was. His message, sent directly to Victoria Grant. My boss is unbelievably hot. And below it, a new message from her. Victoria, my office. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. The air left his lungs. His career, everything he'd worked for, everything that kept Lily fed and safe, was about to disappear because of 5 careless words. Daddy? Lily's sleepy voice broke through his panic. Are you okay? Daniel forced a smile, sliding his phone into his pocket. Yeah, sweetheart. Just tired. But he wasn't okay. He was the furthest thing from okay. Daniel barely slept that night. By 6:30 a.m., he was standing outside Grant Media's downtown headquarters, a towering glass structure that suddenly felt like a guillotine. The building was nearly empty this early. His footsteps echoed through the marble lobby as he headed toward the executive floor, his resignation letter folded in his jacket pocket. He'd spent the night writing it, rewriting it, trying to find words that would preserve some shred of dignity. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt like a descent into execution. Victoria's assistant wasn't at her desk yet. The entire executive suite was silent except for the low hum of the city waking up outside. Daniel approached the glass-walled corner office and knocked. Come in. Victoria's voice was calm, controlled, the same tone she used in board meetings when she was about to dismantle someone's argument. Daniel opened the door. Victoria Grant sat behind a massive desk, her dark hair pulled back in a flawless twist, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. She was reviewing a document, red pen in hand, and didn't look up. Close the door, she said. Daniel obeyed, his heart hammering so hard he thought she might hear it. Victoria set down her pen and finally looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, unreadable. The same eyes that had stared down hostile investors and dismissed incompetent executives without hesitation. Do you know why you're here? She asked. Daniel swallowed hard. Yes. Tell me. His face burned. I sent you a message that was meant for someone else. It was completely inappropriate, and I take full responsibility. I've drafted my resignation. Stop. Victoria held up one hand. Sit down. Daniel froze. What? Sit down. He lowered himself into the chair across from her desk, confusion mixing with dread. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him with an expression he couldn't decode. How long have you worked here, Daniel? 3 years. And in those 3 years, what's your performance record? Daniel blinked. This wasn't the conversation he'd expected. I've exceeded targets every quarter. I led the Riverside campaign that brought in the outdoor equipment account last year. The Riverside campaign, Victoria repeated. That campaign saved this company 40 jobs. Do you know that? I knew it was important. It was more than important. It was essential. She picked up a folder from her desk and slid it across to him. Open it. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were performance reviews, project summaries, client feedback, all relating to his work over the past 3 years. You're one of the best creative strategists this company has, Victoria said. You think like a storyteller, not a salesman. You understand what makes people care. That's rare. Daniel's head was spinning. I don't understand. I sent you a text message that was honest and embarrassing, Victoria interrupted. Yes, I'm aware. But before we discuss that, I need to discuss something more important. She stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The morning sun cast long shadows across her office. This company is in trouble, she said quietly. The board doesn't trust me. Half of them wanted to hire an outside CEO instead of promoting me. They think I'm too young, too aggressive, too female. She turned to face him. They're waiting for me to fail. Daniel stayed silent, unsure where this was going. There's an account that could change everything, Victoria continued. Apex Outdoor Gear. They're looking to rebrand completely. New campaign, new creative direction, new market strategy. The pitch meeting is in 6 weeks. If we land this account, it's worth $30 million over 3 years. If we lose it, the board will have the ammunition they need to remove me. She walked back to her desk, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I need someone who can lead this campaign, she said. Someone who understands narrative and emotion. Someone who's not afraid to take risks. She sat down and looked directly at him. I need you. Daniel's mind went blank. You want me to lead the Apex pitch? Yes. But I sent you a stupid text message, Victoria finished. Yes, it was inappropriate. It was unprofessional. And if you worked for most CEOs, you'd be fired right now. She leaned forward. But I'm not most CEOs. I care about results, not ego. Can you do this job or not? Daniel felt like he'd stepped into an alternate reality. You're serious? Completely. Why me? Victoria's expression softened, just barely, like a crack in armor. Because you're the person who stayed late every night last month to mentor the junior designers. Because you turned down a higher salary at Morrison Creative to stay here when your daughter got sick and you needed the health insurance. Because when I read the work you do, I see someone who actually gives a damn. She paused. And because I've been reading your campaign since the day I took over this company, and I know you're capable of brilliance. Daniel sat back, stunned. He'd never spoken directly to Victoria before last night's disaster. He'd assumed she barely knew his name. The text message was mortifying, Victoria said, but it doesn't define your value to this company. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget you sent it, I'm going to forget I received it, and we're both going to focus on work. Understood? Daniel nodded slowly. Understood. Good. The Apex pitch meeting is October 15th. You have 6 weeks to build something that will save this company. She handed him a thick briefing document. This is everything we know about them. Read it. Think about it. Come back tomorrow with ideas. Daniel took the document, still processing what had just happened. One more thing, Victoria said as he stood to leave. Don't ever lie to me. Don't hide mistakes. If something goes wrong, I want to know immediately. Honesty is the only currency I value. Clear? Clear. Then get to work. Daniel walked out of Victoria's office in a daze. The sun was higher now, and the office was beginning to fill with employees starting their day. He clutched the briefing document like a life raft. He'd expected to be fired. Instead, He'd been handed the most important project of his career. As he headed toward his desk, his phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Marcus. Dude, you never answered. How is the new boss? Daniel stared at the message, then typed back. Daniel. Terrifying. Brilliant. And I think she might have just saved my life. The next 4 weeks became a blur of 18-hour days, endless coffee, and creative work that pushed Daniel to his absolute limits. Victoria had assigned him a small team, 3 designers, 2 copywriters, and 1 strategic analyst named Paula who had a gift for seeing patterns in consumer data. They worked in a converted conference room on the 16th floor, covering the walls with mood boards, sketches, and campaign concepts. Apex Outdoor Gear wasn't just another client. They were a legacy brand struggling to stay relevant in a market dominated by younger, flashier competitors. Their core customers were aging out, and they were bleeding market share to brands that understood social media and influencer culture. Daniel knew the standard pitch would be to make them trendy, edgy, modern. But that felt wrong. Late one night, alone in the conference room, he stared at photos of Apex's original advertisements from the 1970s and 80s. They featured real people, not models, on genuine adventures. A father teaching his son to fish, a woman summiting a mountain alone. A group of friends around a campfire. The tagline back then had been simple: the outdoors is for everyone. Somewhere along the way, Apex had lost that authenticity. They'd started chasing trends instead of telling stories. Daniel grabbed a marker and wrote on the whiteboard, "What if we don't reinvent them? What if we remind people who they always were?" The next morning, he presented the concept to Victoria. She sat in the conference room listening without interruption as Daniel walked her through the pitch. Instead of chasing millennial audiences with extreme sports and Instagram aesthetics, Apex should return to their roots. Real stories, real people, real experiences. The campaign would feature actual customers sharing moments the gear had been part of. No celebrities, no manufactured adventure, just truth. When he finished, Victoria was silent for a long moment. "It's risky," she finally said. "I know. Authenticity doesn't always test well in focus groups." "No, but it builds loyalty." Victoria stood and walked to the mood board, studying the images Daniel's team had collected: families camping, solo hikers, weekend fishermen. "This could backfire spectacularly," she said. "Or it could be exactly what they need." Victoria turned to face him. "If this works, you'll have proven my instinct about you was right. If it fails, the board will use it to question every decision I make." Daniel met her eyes. "I know what's at stake." "Do you?" Victoria's voice was quiet but intense. "Because it's not just the company. It's my credibility, my leadership, everything I've built." "I understand." Victoria studied him for another moment, then nodded. "Refine it, make it bulletproof. The pitch is in 2 weeks." As the pitch date approached, Daniel barely saw his daughter. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had been watching Lily after school, and the guilt was eating him alive. But every time he thought about pulling back, he remembered Victoria's words. "Everything I've built." This wasn't just about him anymore. One evening, Victoria found him in the conference room at 11 p.m., surrounded by revised presentations and half-empty coffee cups. "You're still here," she said from the doorway. Daniel looked up, startled. "I wanted to review the customer testimonial videos one more time." Victoria walked into the room, setting down her briefcase. She'd removed her suit jacket, and she looked more human than he'd ever seen her, tired but focused. "Show me," she said. They spent the next hour reviewing footage together. Victoria asked sharp questions, caught inconsistencies, pushed for stronger narrative threads. But she also listened, really listened, when Daniel defended his choices. At some point, the conversation shifted from work to something more personal. "How's your daughter handling all this?" Victoria asked. Daniel was surprised by the question. "She's resilient, more than she should have to be." "How old is she?" 7. Victoria nodded slowly. "That's a hard age to have an absent parent." The words stung because they were true. "I'm doing my best." "I know you are." Victoria's voice was gentler than he'd ever heard it. "My father worked constantly when I was growing up, built this company from nothing. I barely saw him." She paused. "I used to resent it, but I also understood it." "Did you?" Daniel asked quietly. Eventually. He was building something for us, for our family. He just forgot to include us in it while he did. She looked at Daniel. Don't make that mistake. Daniel felt the weight of her words. After this pitch, I'll do better. See that you do. They returned to the videos, but something had shifted between them. The wall of professional distance had cracked just slightly. The pitch meeting with Apex Outdoor Gear was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Daniel's team arrived at the office at dawn, running through the presentation one final time. Paula checked data. The designers reviewed every slide. The copywriters rehearsed transitions. Victoria appeared at noon, impeccably dressed, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd closed billion-dollar deals. Ready? She asked Daniel. As ready as we'll ever be. The Apex executives arrived exactly on time. 3 senior VPs, the CMO, and the CEO. A weathered man in his 60s named Robert Chen, who'd been with the company for 40 years. The pitch began. Daniel opened with the problem. Apex wasn't failing because they were old-fashioned. They were failing because they'd stopped being themselves. The outdoor industry had become about performance metrics and viral content. But the people who actually spent time outside, the weekend hikers, the casual campers, the families teaching their kids to fish, they weren't looking for extremes. They were looking for connection. He showed the videos his team had collected. A single mother talking about taking her kids camping for the first time with Apex gear. An elderly couple describing 50 years of backpacking adventures. A young man explaining how a solo hiking trip helped him through grief. Real people, real stories, real gear. The tagline, Apex, still here for the real adventurers. When the presentation ended, the room was silent. Robert Chen stood and walked to the window, his back to the group. Daniel's heart sank. He'd miscalculated. The pitch was too simple, too emotional. When I started at Apex, Robert said quietly, we weren't the biggest outdoor company. We weren't the flashiest. But we were the most honest. He turned around, and Daniel saw his eyes were wet. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. He looked at his team. I want this campaign. The room erupted in relieved laughter and congratulations. Daniel felt Victoria's hand briefly touch his shoulder, a gesture so quick he almost missed it. But when he glanced at her, he saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Pride. Marnab. The celebration back at Grant Media was subdued but genuine. Victoria called an impromptu meeting to announce the win, and the entire creative department cheered. But as the crowd dispersed, Daniel noticed something odd. Several senior executives who should have been celebrating looked tense. One of them, Richard Dalton, a board member Daniel recognized from company emails, was having an intense, quiet conversation with 2 other executives in the corner. They were looking at Victoria. Daniel felt a chill of unease. Later that evening, as he was packing up to finally go home and see Lily, Victoria called him to her office. Close the door, she said. Daniel did, sensing her shift in mood. We need to talk about something, Victoria said. The win today was significant, but it's also going to put a target on both of us. What do you mean? Victoria leaned against her desk. There are people on this board who want me to fail. Richard Dalton is one of them. He's been pushing for the company to sell to a private equity firm that would gut the staff and flip the assets. This win makes that harder for him. That's good, isn't it? It's good for the company, but Richard doesn't care about the company. He cares about the payout he'd get from the sale. She paused. And he's going to come after us to get it. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. What can he do? He can make our professional relationship look inappropriate, Victoria said bluntly. We've been working closely together, late nights, one-on-one meetings. It doesn't matter that it's been completely professional. He'll twist it into something else. Daniel's face flushed. Because of that text message. That's part of it, but mostly because you're talented and I promoted you over people with more seniority. Victoria's jaw tightened. He'll call it favoritism. He'll imply there's something personal between us. That's insane. We've barely... I know, Victoria interrupted, but that won't stop him from trying. The office suddenly felt very small. Daniel realized they were alone on the executive floor, the city lights glowing through the windows behind Victoria. What do we do? He asked. Victoria met his eyes. We keep everything professional. We document everything. We don't give him any ammunition. Daniel nodded, but something unspoken hung in the air between them. There's something else you should know, Victoria said quietly. The reason I pushed you so hard on this project wasn't just because you're talented. Daniel waited. It's because I saw something in you that reminded me of why I wanted to lead this company in the first place, she continued. You care about people. You lead with integrity. You don't cut corners or throw others under the bus to get ahead. She looked away. That's rare, especially in this industry. You do the same thing, Daniel said. Victoria laughed, a short, bitter sound. You don't know me very well. I know you gave me a second chance when most people would have fired me. I know you built a campaign strategy that protects junior staff during budget cuts. I know. Stop. Victoria's voice was sharp, but her expression was complicated. You're giving me too much credit. I don't think I am. The silence between them stretched, charged with something neither of them was willing to name. Finally, Victoria straightened. Go home to your daughter. You've earned a break. Daniel hesitated at the door. Victoria? Yes? Thank you for believing in me. She didn't respond, but something in her eyes shifted, softened, just for a moment. Daniel left, but the weight of that look stayed with him all the way home. Lily was asleep when he finally got back to their small apartment. Mrs. Chen had left a note saying she'd fed her and helped with homework. Guilt twisted in Daniel's chest. He sat on the edge of Lily's bed, watching her sleep. Her curly hair spread across the pillow, one hand clutching a stuffed elephant she'd had since she was a baby. She looked so much like her mother. Sarah had died 3 years ago, cancer, quick and brutal. One day she'd been fine, the next she was gone. Daniel had been drowning ever since, trying to be both parents, trying to keep his career alive, trying to give Lily the stability she deserved. He'd been failing at all of it until 6 weeks ago. Now, suddenly, he was succeeding at work. But at what cost? His phone buzzed, a message from Victoria. Victoria, congratulations on the win, you earned it. He stared at the message, feeling something he couldn't quite define. Then he typed back, Daniel, we earned it. Thank you for taking the risk. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Victoria, get some sleep. Tomorrow we figure out how to keep it. Daniel set down his phone and looked back at Lily. Everything was about to get more complicated, but for the first time in 3 years, he felt like he was building something worth fighting for. The warning signs started small. 3 days after the Apex win, Daniel arrived at work to find his security badge deactivated. The front desk guard apologized profusely while making calls to IT, explaining it was probably just a system glitch. 20 minutes later, Daniel's access was restored. But the next morning, his company email was locked. Another glitch, IT said, fixed within an hour. On Friday, he was removed from 3 project distribution lists he'd been on for years. Paula noticed it first. She appeared at Daniel's desk during lunch, her expression troubled. Something's wrong, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I was just told to route all Apex communications through Richard Dalton's office for board oversight. Since when does a board member get involved in campaign execution? Daniel felt ice in his veins. Since now, apparently. Daniel, this isn't normal. Richard's never cared about creative work. He's a finance guy. Paula lowered her voice. People are talking. About what? Paula hesitated. About you and Victoria, about how quickly you got promoted to lead Apex, about all the late nights in her office. Daniel's jaw tightened. We were working. I know that. But Richard's people are spreading a different story. She looked genuinely worried. Be careful. He's dangerous when he wants something. After Paula left, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. Victoria had predicted this. She'd warned him that Richard would weaponize their professional relationship, but knowing it was coming didn't make it easier to face. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Marcus, lunch tomorrow? Haven't seen you in weeks. Daniel realized with a start that he'd been so consumed with work that he'd barely spoken to his best friend since the night of the accidental text. He typed back quickly. Daniel, tomorrow works. Noon at Rossi's? Marcus, perfect. You can tell me about this mysterious boss situation. Daniel smiled despite everything. Marcus had no idea how complicated that situation had become. That evening, Victoria called an unexpected meeting with Daniel and the core Apex team. When they gathered in the conference room, her expression was grim. Richard Dalton has requested a full audit of the Apex campaign development process, she announced without preamble. He's claiming there were irregularities in how the project was assigned and executed. The room went silent. What kind of irregularities? One of the designers asked. He's being deliberately vague, Victoria said, but the subtext is clear. He's questioning my judgment in selecting Daniel to lead the pitch. Daniel felt everyone's eyes turn toward him. This is complete garbage, Paula said angrily. Daniel's work was flawless. We won the account. I'm aware, Victoria said. But Richard isn't interested in results. He's interested in creating doubt. She looked directly at Daniel. He's going to examine every email, every meeting, every decision. He's looking for anything he can twist into evidence of favoritism or misconduct. There isn't any, Daniel said firmly. I know, but he'll try to manufacture it anyway. Victoria's voice was hard, which means from this point forward, we play everything absolutely by the book. No closed-door meetings, all communications documented, everything transparent. The team nodded, but Daniel could see the fear in their faces. They just won the biggest account of the year, and instead of celebrating, they were being investigated. After the others left, Victoria gestured for Daniel to stay. Close the door, she said. Daniel hesitated. You just said no closed-door meetings. I also said everything documented. Victoria pulled out her phone and set it on the table, hitting record. There, documented. Now close the door. He did. Victoria walked to the windows, her back to him. The city stretched out below, lights beginning to flicker on as evening descended. I need to tell you something about Richard Dalton, she said quietly. Something that doesn't leave this room. Daniel waited. 3 years ago, before I became CEO, Richard tried to engineer a hostile takeover of this company. He wanted to sell it to Meridian Capital, a private equity firm he has financial ties to. She turned to face him. My father blocked it. It cost Richard millions in potential fees. So this is revenge. Partly, but it's also opportunity. Victoria's expression was cold. If he can prove I'm unfit to lead, if he can create enough scandal around my judgment, the board might remove me. And with me gone, there's no one left to stop the sale. Daniel felt the full weight of what she was saying. How many board members support him? 4 out of 9. He needs 5 for a majority vote. Victoria's jaw tightened. He's been courting Margaret Chen, one of the independent directors. If he flips her, I'm out. What can we do? Victoria looked at him for a long moment. We do exactly what we've been doing. We execute flawlessly. We prove through results that my leadership is sound and my judgment is solid. She paused. And we give him absolutely nothing to work with. He's going to twist everything anyway. I know, but if we're clean, his accusations won't stick. Victoria's voice softened slightly. I need you to understand what you're walking into. This audit will be invasive. They'll question your credentials, your experience, your relationship with me. They'll try to make you look incompetent or corrupt. I can handle it. Can you? Victoria challenged. Because it's not just your career on the line. You have a daughter. If this gets ugly, it could affect your reputation industry-wide. Daniel met her eyes. You gave me a chance when I needed one. I'm not walking away now. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Gratitude mixed with something deeper. Thank you, she said quietly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Daniel's phone buzzed, breaking the tension. A message from Mrs. Chen. Lily's asking when you'll be home. She misses you. Guilt crashed over him. I need to go. Victoria nodded. Go. Be with your daughter. As Daniel headed for the door, Victoria called after him. Daniel? He turned. Whatever Richard throws at us, she said, we face it together. Understood? Understood. But as Daniel left the building and headed home through the crowded Chicago streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that together was becoming a dangerous word. The next day, Daniel met Marcus at Rossi's, a cramped Italian restaurant they'd been going to since college. Marcus was already at their usual booth, 2 beers waiting. Finally, Marcus said as Daniel slid into the seat. I was starting to think you'd been abducted by aliens. Close. Abducted by work. Marcus studied him. You look exhausted. I am exhausted. So tell me everything. Last I heard you'd sent a career-ending text to your terrifying boss. Now you're leading major campaigns? What happened? Daniel took a long drink of beer, then told Marcus the whole story. The pitch assignment. The Apex win. Victoria's warning about Richard Dalton. The audit. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Let me get this straight, Marcus said when Daniel finished. Your boss saved your job, promoted you, and now some board member is trying to destroy both of you because he thinks there's something inappropriate going on? That's the summary, yeah. And is there? Daniel looked up sharply. Is there what? Something inappropriate going on. No, it's completely professional. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Daniel, I've known you for 15 years. I can tell when you're lying to yourself. I'm not. You've spent every night for 6 weeks working alone with a woman you described as unbelievably hot. You're defending her against corporate conspiracy. You just said you'd risk your career for her. Marcus leaned forward. Come on, man. Be honest. Daniel felt his face flush. It's not like that. What's it like then? Daniel struggled to find words. She's brilliant. She's tough. She sees things in people that they don't see in themselves. When I'm working with her, I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters. That's not a description of a boss, Marcus said gently. That's a description of someone you're falling for. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Was Marcus right? Even if that were true, Daniel said slowly, it doesn't matter. She's my boss. She's way out of my league, and we're in the middle of a corporate investigation that could destroy both our careers. So you're just going to ignore it? I don't have a choice. Marcus shook his head. You always have a choice. The question is whether you're brave enough to make it. Daniel didn't have an answer to that. They finished lunch talking about safer topics. Marcus's girlfriend, Lily's upcoming school play, the Bears' terrible season. But Marcus's words stayed with Daniel long after they parted ways. Someone you're falling for. Was that what this was? That night, Daniel picked Lily up from Mrs. Chen's apartment and took her out for pizza. Just the two of them. No work calls, no distractions. Lily devoured 2 slices before finally asking the question Daniel had been dreading. Daddy, are you okay? Daniel looked at his daughter. She was so perceptive, so aware of things she shouldn't have to worry about at 7 years old. What makes you think I'm not okay? He asked gently. You've been sad and tired, and you're gone a lot. Lily's voice was small. Did I do something wrong? Daniel's heart broke. He reached across the table and took her hand. No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. I've just been working really hard on an important project. Is it finished now? Sort of. But there's more work to do. Lily frowned. Will you have to keep being gone? Daniel wanted to promise her that everything would go back to normal. That he'd be home every night for dinner, that they'd have weekends together again. But he couldn't lie to her. For a little while longer, he said. But I promise I'm going to do better, starting tonight. What do you want to do? Lily's face lit up. Can we go to the park? The one with the swings? Absolutely. They spent the next 2 hours at the park, and for that brief window, Daniel let himself forget about Victoria, Richard Dalton, corporate investigations, and everything else. He pushed Lily on the swings, helped her across the monkey bars, and listened to her talk about her friends at school. For 2 hours, he was just a dad. But as the sun set and they headed home, reality came rushing back. His phone had 11 missed calls, 6 from work numbers, 5 from Victoria. Daniel's stomach dropped. He called her back immediately. Where have you been? Victoria's voice was tight with stress. With my daughter. What's wrong? Richard moved up the audit. It starts Monday. They want to interview everyone involved in the Apex campaign. She paused. They want to start with you. Daniel stopped walking. Lily was a few steps ahead, humming to herself. Monday, he repeated. That's 3 days. I know. Daniel, I need you to be prepared. They're going to ask about every interaction we've had, every meeting, every decision. Victoria's voice dropped. They're going to try to catch you in inconsistencies. I'll tell the truth. I know you will. But the truth can be twisted depending on how it's presented. She hesitated. There's something else. Richard's hired an outside investigator, someone with a reputation for finding problems, even when they don't exist. Daniel felt cold. Who? Catherine Morrison. She used to work for the SEC investigating corporate fraud. Victoria's voice was grim. She's ruthless, and she's expensive. Richard's serious about this. Then we'll be serious right back. Daniel, we didn't do anything wrong, Daniel said firmly. We worked on a campaign. We won an account. That's it. No amount of investigation can change facts. Victoria was silent for a moment. I hope you're right. After they hung up, Daniel looked at Lily, who was now sitting on a bench watching the last light fade from the sky. He'd promised her he'd do better. He'd promised her more time, but that promise was about to be tested in ways he couldn't have imagined. Monday morning arrived like a storm. Daniel showed up to work at 7, dressed in his best suit, carrying a folder with copies of every email, memo, and document related to the Apex campaign. He'd spent the entire weekend organizing his files, preparing for questions, trying to predict what Catherine Morrison would ask. The interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock in Conference Room B. At 8:45, Victoria found him in the hallway. Ready? She asked. As ready as I'll ever be. Victoria looked like she hadn't slept. There were shadows under her eyes, and her usual perfect composure seemed strained. Remember, she said quietly, answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer extra information. Don't speculate. Just facts. I know. And Daniel? Victoria's voice softened. No matter what they imply about us, don't let them bait you into defending something that doesn't need defending. Before Daniel could respond, a woman appeared at the end of the hallway. Catherine Morrison was in her 50s, wearing a severe gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She had sharp eyes and the kind of face that revealed nothing. Mr. Hayes, she said, I'm ready for you. Daniel glanced at Victoria one last time, then followed Catherine into the conference room. The interview lasted 4 hours. Catherine Morrison asked about everything, how Daniel had been selected for the Apex project, how many meetings he'd had with Victoria, whether those meetings were always professional, whether he'd received any special treatment, whether there had been any inappropriate communications. Daniel answered every question calmly, factually, referring to his documentation when necessary. But halfway through, Catherine shifted tactics. Mr. Hayes, I've reviewed your personnel file, she said, opening a folder. Prior to 6 weeks ago, you'd never led a campaign of this scale. In fact, you'd been passed over for several promotions in the past 3 years. Can you explain why Miss Grant suddenly decided you were qualified for such a significant responsibility? Daniel kept his voice steady. You'd have to ask her, but I can tell you that I worked harder on that campaign than anything else in my career. I'm sure you did, but that doesn't answer my question. Catherine leaned forward. What changed 6 weeks ago that made you suddenly worthy of this opportunity? Daniel saw the trap. If he mentioned the text message, it would look like Victoria had felt guilty or compromised. If he didn't mention it, and Catherine already knew about it, he'd look like he was hiding something. He chose honesty. 6 weeks ago, I made a mistake, Daniel said. I sent Ms. Grant an inappropriate text message that was meant for a friend. I expected to be fired. Instead, she looked at my work history and decided I had potential that was being wasted. She gave me a chance to prove myself. Catherine's expression didn't change. And you didn't find it strange that she responded to an inappropriate message by promoting you? She didn't promote me. She gave me a project. I earned the results. Did you? Catherine pulled out another document. I have testimony from several colleagues suggesting you received special access to resources, extended deadlines, and direct mentorship from Ms. Grant that other team leads don't typically receive. Because the project required it. Apex was a critical account. So Ms. Grant says, Catherine's voice was cold, but isn't it possible she gave you preferential treatment for other reasons? No? You sound very certain. I am certain. Victoria Grant is the most professional person I've ever worked with. Every decision she made was about the company's success, not personal favoritism. Catherine smiled, a thin, humorless expression. Interesting that you refer to her by her first name. Daniel realized his mistake too late. That's what the team calls her. Really? I've interviewed 5 other employees today. They all called her Ms. Grant. Catherine made a note in her file. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, how would you characterize your relationship with Victoria Grant? The question hung in the air like a blade. Daniel chose his words carefully. Professional, respectful, focused on results. Nothing more? Nothing more. Catherine studied him for a long moment. We'll see about that. The interview ended 20 minutes later. Daniel walked out feeling like he'd been through a battlefield. Paula was waiting in the hallway, her face pale. How bad was it? Bad. You're next? She nodded. Daniel, she's already decided we're guilty of something. She's just looking for evidence to support her conclusion. Then we don't give her any. But as the week progressed, Daniel realized it didn't matter what they gave or didn't give. Catherine Morrison was building a case out of thin air. She interviewed the entire Apex team, asking leading questions designed to create doubt. She reviewed 3 years of email correspondence, highlighting any instance where Daniel and Victoria had communicated after hours. She interviewed colleagues who barely knew Daniel, asking if they'd noticed any special treatment. By Friday, the atmosphere in the office was toxic. People avoided eye contact with Daniel in the hallways. Conversation stopped when he entered rooms. Even members of his own team seemed nervous around him. Victoria was getting it worse. Richard had leaked selective details of the investigation to friendly board members, and rumors were spreading that she'd violated ethics policies by developing an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when the narrative was already written. Friday evening, Daniel stayed late to finish a client proposal. The office was mostly empty when he heard shouting from the executive floor. He shouldn't have gone to investigate. He should have minded his own business. But he recognized one of the voices, Victoria's. Daniel took the elevator up and found Victoria's office door open. Inside, Richard Dalton stood across from her desk, his face red with anger. You're finished, Victoria, Richard was saying. The board meeting is Tuesday. I have the votes to remove you. You have nothing, Victoria shot back. Catherine's investigation has found exactly 0 evidence of misconduct because there isn't any. I don't need evidence of misconduct. I need evidence of poor judgment. Richard's smile was cruel. And promoting an unqualified employee because you have feelings for him? That's poor judgment. Daniel Hayes is extremely qualified, and you know it. What I know is that you've been spending an inappropriate amount of time with a subordinate. What I know is that you gave him opportunities that should have gone to more senior staff. What I know is that it looks bad. Richard leaned on her desk. Perception is reality in this business, Victoria. And the perception is that you let personal feelings compromise your professional judgment. That's a lie. Maybe, but it's a convincing lie. Richard straightened. Step down voluntarily, and I'll make sure you get a generous severance package. Fight this, and I'll drag your reputation through the mud. Get out of my office! Richard headed for the door, then stopped when he saw Daniel standing in the hallway. His smile widened. Speak of the devil. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, do you make a habit of lurking outside your boss's office after hours? Daniel's hands clenched into fists. I heard shouting. I bet you did. Richard looked between Daniel and Victoria. You two just keep making this easier for me. He walked past Daniel and disappeared down the hallway. Daniel stepped into Victoria's office. She was standing by the windows, her shoulders rigid, staring out at the city. How much did you hear? She asked, without turning around. Enough. Victoria was silent for a long moment, then quietly. He's right. I've lost. You haven't lost anything. Tuesday's board meeting will prove otherwise. Victoria's voice was hollow. Richard has the votes. I'm out. Daniel walked to stand beside her. Then we find a way to change the votes. There is no way. It's over. I don't believe that. Victoria finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were tired, defeated, an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Why are you still here, Daniel? She asked. You could walk away from this. Distance yourself before the fallout hits. Protect your career. Because I don't abandon people who believed in me. Even when they're going down? Especially then. Something broke in Victoria's expression. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then she straightened, rebuilding her armor. "You should go home to your daughter," she said. "Victoria, please, just go." Daniel wanted to argue. He wanted to stay. He wanted to find the words that would fix this, but he could see she needed to be alone. As he walked to the elevator, his mind was racing. Richard had the votes. The board meeting was Tuesday. That gave them 3 days to find something, anything, that could turn this around. 3 days to save Victoria's career. 3 days to prove that the truth mattered more than Richard Dalton's lies. The elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped inside. But as they slid closed, he made himself a promise. He wasn't giving up. Not on Victoria, not on the company, not on what they'd built together. He had 3 days to find a way to fight back, and he was going to use every single one of them. Daniel didn't go home that night. Instead, he sat in an all-night diner 3 blocks from the office, drinking bad coffee and staring at his laptop screen. 3 days wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. He started by reviewing everything he knew about Richard Dalton. The man had been on Grant Media's board for 12 years, appointed during Victoria's father's tenure. He had a background in finance and consulting, serving on multiple corporate boards simultaneously. On paper, he looked like the perfect fiduciary, experienced, connected, focused on shareholder value. But Victoria had said Richard wanted to sell the company to Meridian Capital. If that was true, there had to be a financial motive. Personal gain beyond his board duties. Daniel opened a new search window and typed in Richard Dalton's name along with Meridian Capital. The first few results were standard business articles, board appointments, merger announcements. Nothing unusual. Then Daniel found something interesting, a 3-year-old article from a financial news site about Meridian Capital's acquisition strategy. Buried in the middle of the piece was a single paragraph mentioning that Richard Dalton had previously served as a senior advisor to Meridian's founding partners. Daniel sat back. Richard wasn't just pushing for a sale to Meridian. He had a direct professional relationship with them. That could be a conflict of interest, but proving it would require more than an old news article. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Marcus, still at work?" "It's almost midnight." Daniel glanced at the time. 11:47 p.m. He'd been at the diner for 3 hours. "Daniel, working on something important. Can't explain yet." Marcus, "Does this have to do with your boss?" Daniel, "Everything has to do with her right now." Marcus, "Be careful, man. Don't lose yourself in someone else's fight." Daniel stared at the message. Was that what he was doing? Losing himself? Or was he finally fighting for something that mattered? He didn't answer Marcus. Instead, he went back to his research. For the next 2 hours, Daniel dug through public records, SEC filings, and corporate databases. He cross-referenced board appointments, consulting agreements, and financial disclosures. It was tedious, exhausting work, but slowly, a picture began to emerge. Richard Dalton had served on the boards of 4 companies in the past decade. 3 of them had been sold to private equity firms within 2 years of his appointment. In each case, Richard had received substantial consulting fees following the sale, fees far larger than his standard board compensation. It was a pattern, and patterns suggested intent. But Daniel still didn't have proof of anything illegal. Unethical, maybe. Suspicious, definitely. But not criminal. He needed something concrete. Something that would prove Richard was actively working against Grant Media's interests for personal profit. At 2 a.m., exhausted and running out of ideas, Daniel called Paula. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. "Daniel, what's wrong?" "I need your help. Can you access the company's financial systems from home?" Paula was suddenly alert. "Why?" "I'm looking for payment records. Specifically, any consulting fees or advisory payments made to board members in the last 3 years." "That's confidential information. If I get caught accessing it without authorization, I know what I'm asking," Daniel interrupted, "and I know the risk. But Richard's about to destroy Victoria's career with lies. If we don't find something to stop him, it's over." Paula was silent for a long moment. "What exactly am I looking for?" "Anything that shows Richard has a financial relationship with competitors or acquisition firms, particularly Meridian Capital." That would be a massive conflict of interest. "I know," Paula sighed. "Give me an hour. I'll see what I can find." 70 minutes later, Paula called back. "I found something," she said, and Daniel could hear the tension in her voice. "But Daniel, this is bad, really bad." "Tell me." Richard's consulting firm received 3 payments from Grant Media over the past 18 months. Each one was approved as strategic advisory services. The total is almost $2 million. Daniel's pulse quickened. That seems excessive for board oversight. It's not just excessive, it's suspicious. I cross-referenced the payment dates with company events. Paula paused. Each payment was made within 2 weeks of us losing a major account or client to a competitor. The implications hit Daniel like a freight train. He was being paid every time the company failed. It looks that way. But there's more. Paula's voice dropped. I checked the competitors who won those accounts. 2 of them are portfolio companies owned by Meridian Capital. Daniel felt his hands go numb. Richard was sabotaging Grant Media to benefit Meridian. I can't prove that from these records alone, but the correlation is too strong to be coincidence. Can you send me the payment records? Already done. Check your personal email. Paula hesitated. Daniel, if we're wrong about this, if Richard has a legitimate explanation, we'll both be fired for accessing confidential data. And if we're right, then we just found proof that a board member has been systematically destroying the company for personal profit. After hanging up with Paula, Daniel opened his email and reviewed the payment records she'd sent. The numbers were damning, but numbers alone wouldn't be enough to convince the board. He needed something more direct, something that proved intent. He pulled up Richard's professional history again, this time focusing on his consulting firm, Dalton Strategic Advisory. The firm had a sparse website with vague descriptions of services and no client list, but the About page included bios of Richard's partners, 3 other executives with backgrounds in private equity and corporate restructuring. Daniel started researching each partner individually. He was looking for connections, overlaps, anything that linked them to Meridian Capital or the competitors who'd won accounts from Grant Media. At 4 a.m., he found it. One of Richard's partners, Thomas Webb, had previously worked as a senior vice president at Meridian Capital. According to his LinkedIn profile, he'd left Meridian 3 years ago to join Dalton Strategic Advisory. But when Daniel dug deeper, he found something Webb's LinkedIn didn't mention. SEC filings showing that Webb still owned significant equity in Meridian's investment funds. Richard's business partner was actively invested in the same firm Richard was trying to sell Grant Media to. Daniel sat back, his mind racing. This wasn't just a conflict of interest. This was fraud. Richard had been using his board position to sabotage Grant Media, while his business partner profited from the company's decline through Meridian's acquisition of competitors. It was elegant, it was ruthless, and it was almost impossible to prove without access to private financial records. Almost. Daniel pulled out his phone and called the one person who might be able to help. Marcus answered after 5 rings, his voice thick with sleep. Daniel, it's 4 a.m. I know. I need a favor. Now? Now, Marcus groaned. What kind of favor? You still have friends at the Tribune, right? Investigative reporters. Yeah, why? Because I think I just uncovered corporate fraud, and I need someone who knows how to dig deeper than I can. Marcus was suddenly wide awake. You're serious? Completely serious. Daniel, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong, but I need help proving it. Daniel took a breath. Can you connect me with someone or not? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I can make a call, but Daniel, be careful. If you're going after a board member with fraud allegations and you can't back it up, he'll destroy you. He's already trying to destroy me. At least this way I'm fighting back. By Sunday morning, Daniel had sent everything he'd found to Jennifer Chen, an investigative reporter at the Chicago Tribune that Marcus had connected him with. She'd been skeptical at first, but after reviewing the payment records and corporate filings, her tone had shifted. This is circumstantial, Jennifer had said, but it's suggestive enough to warrant deeper investigation. Give me 24 hours. I have sources who can access corporate communications that aren't public. Daniel had wanted to feel relieved, but 24 hours meant Monday evening, less than a day before the board meeting that would decide Victoria's fate. It would have to be enough. Sunday afternoon, Daniel finally went home. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, and exhaustion was starting to make his vision blur. Lily was at Mrs. Chen's apartment. Daniel picked her up, thanking Mrs. Chen for the 100th time for her patience. "You look terrible," Mrs. Chen said bluntly. "When's the last time you slept?" "I'll sleep when this is over." "When what's over?" Daniel managed a weak smile. "I'll tell you when I can." Back at their apartment, Daniel made Lily lunch and listened to her talk about a book she'd been reading at school. She was animated, happy, oblivious to the corporate warfare her father had been waging while she slept. "Daddy?" Lily asked as they finished eating. "Are you in trouble?" Daniel looked at his daughter. "What makes you think that?" "You have that look, the same look you had after Mom died, like you're worried about something big." Daniel's throat tightened. She was too perceptive, too aware. "I'm dealing with some difficult stuff at work," he admitted. "But it's going to be okay." "Are you sure?" Daniel pulled Lily into a hug. "I'm going to do everything I can to make it okay." That night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel's phone rang. Jennifer Chen. "I found something," she said without preamble. "Can you meet me?" "When?" "Now. There's a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue that's open late. The Grind." 20 minutes later, Daniel was sitting across from Jennifer in a nearly empty coffee shop. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and an intensity that reminded him of Victoria. She slid a folder across the table. "What you suspected was right," Jennifer said. "Richard Dalton has been actively working to devalue Grant Media, but it's worse than you thought." Daniel opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, dozens of them. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "I can't reveal my sources, but these are internal communications from Dalton Strategic Advisory. Read the one on top." Daniel read the email. It was from Richard to Thomas Webb, dated 6 months ago. "Tom, Grant Media's Q2 numbers are weaker than projected. Victoria's leadership is creating board tension. If we can push one more major client to Meridian's portfolio companies, the board will have enough ammunition to force a sale discussion. Timeline, 12 to 18 months. Daniel's hands shook as he read. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud," he said. "It's worse than fraud. It's breach of fiduciary duty, market manipulation, and possibly securities violations." Jennifer flipped to another email. "Read this one." The second email was from Thomas Webb to Richard, dated 3 weeks ago. "Richard, Apex account win is a problem. Victoria's stock is rising with the board. Need to neutralize this quickly. Suggest we pivot strategy. Manufacture ethics violation. Romantic relationship with subordinate plays well. Board won't tolerate appearance of impropriety regardless of facts." Daniel felt sick. The entire investigation, Catherine Morrison, the interrogations, the accusations, it had all been orchestrated by Richard from the beginning, not because there was any actual misconduct, but because he needed to destroy Victoria's credibility before she could stabilize the company. "There's more," Jennifer said, pulling out another document. "Financial records showing Richard received payments from Meridian Capital totaling $4 million over the past 3 years, categorized as consulting fees. The timing correlates directly with Grant Media's major account losses. He was being paid to sabotage his own company." Exactly. And if Grant Media had been sold to Meridian, Richard and his partners would have received additional fees estimated at 15 to 20 million. Daniel looked up at Jennifer. "What do we do with this?" "That's up to you. I can publish the story, but it'll take a few days to get through legal review. Or you can take this directly to the board before their meeting Tuesday. If you publish, Richard will know it's coming. He'll have time to prepare a defense." "True. But if you go to the board without media coverage, Richard could suppress it, claim the documents are fake, discredit you as a disgruntled employee." Daniel thought fast. "What if we do both? I present this to the board Tuesday morning. You publish the story Tuesday afternoon, regardless of what the board decides." Jennifer smiled. "I like the way you think, but there's a risk. If the board sides with Richard despite this evidence, you'll be fired before my article even hits the website." "I know. And you're willing to take that risk?" Daniel thought about Victoria standing alone in her office, defeated and exhausted. He thought about everything she'd done for him, the second chance, the trust, the belief that he was capable of more than he'd imagined. "Yes," he said, "I'm willing." Jennifer closed the folder and slid it back to Daniel. Then this is yours. Use it well. Monday morning, Daniel arrived at work carrying the folder like it was a loaded weapon. He'd spent the entire night rehearsing what he would say, how he would present the evidence, what arguments Richard might make in response. He needed to get this in front of the board before Tuesday's meeting, but he couldn't go through official channels. Richard would block him. The solution came from an unexpected source. At noon, Daniel received an email from Margaret Chen, the independent board member Richard had been courting. The subject line read, "Unofficial conversation." Daniel opened it. "Mr. Hayes, I've heard troubling things about the ethics investigation involving you and Ms. Grant. I'd like to hear your perspective before tomorrow's board meeting. Can we speak confidentially this afternoon?" 3 p.m. at the Riverside Cafe on Walker Drive. Daniel stared at the email. This could be a trap. Margaret might be gathering information for Richard, or she might be genuinely uncertain, the swing vote Victoria needed. Daniel wrote back, "I'll be there." At 2:45 p.m., Daniel sat in a quiet corner booth at the Riverside Cafe, the folder of evidence beside him. His palms were sweating. Margaret Chen arrived exactly at 3. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd spent decades navigating corporate politics. "Mr. Hayes," she said, sitting across from him. "Thank you for meeting me. Thank you for reaching out." Margaret ordered tea, then folded her hands on the table. "I'll be direct. Richard Dalton has presented a compelling case that Victoria Grant exercised poor judgment in promoting you. He's arguing that her leadership is compromised by personal feelings. Tomorrow, the board will vote on her removal." She paused. "I'm the deciding vote." Daniel's heart pounded. "What would you like to know?" "The truth. Not the version Richard's investigator manufactured, not the version Victoria might tell to save her job. The actual truth about your relationship." Daniel met her eyes. "Victoria Grant is the most principled person I've ever worked for. When I made a mistake that should have ended my career, she looked past the embarrassment and saw potential. She gave me an opportunity based on merit, not favoritism. Every decision she made was about the company's success. Richard claims you received preferential treatment. I received the resources necessary to execute a critical campaign. So did every other team lead on high-priority projects. And your relationship with Victoria? Is it purely professional?" Daniel hesitated. This was the moment of truth. "I respect her deeply," he said carefully. "I admire her leadership. I'm grateful for the opportunities she's given me, but our relationship has been completely professional. We've never crossed any ethical boundaries." Margaret studied him. "You're choosing your words very carefully." "Because I know how they'll be interpreted." "Let me ask a different question." Margaret's voice softened. "If you weren't her employee, would you want there to be something more between you?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He could lie, give the safe answer, but Victoria had told him she only valued honesty. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "If the circumstances were different, I would. But they're not different. She's my boss, and neither of us has acted on anything inappropriate because we both understand what's at stake." Margaret nodded slowly. "That's the first honest thing anyone said to me about this situation." She sipped her tea. "Richard wants me to believe Victoria is reckless, that she let her personal feelings compromise her judgment. But what you're describing is the opposite, someone who maintained boundaries even when it was difficult." "That's exactly who she is." Margaret set down her tea. "Why did you really want to meet with me, Mr. Hayes?" Daniel slid the folder across the table. "Because I have evidence that Richard Dalton has been systematically sabotaging this company for personal profit. And I think you should see it before you cast your vote." Margaret opened the folder. Her expression remained neutral as she read, but Daniel saw her jaw tighten. She read every page, every email, every financial record. When she finally looked up, her eyes were hard. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "I can't reveal my sources, but I verified everything in that folder. It's real." Margaret closed the folder carefully. "If this is accurate, Richard hasn't just violated his fiduciary duty. He's committed multiple felonies." "I know. Why bring this to me instead of the authorities?" "Because the board meeting is tomorrow. If Richard succeeds in removing Victoria, he'll have control of the sale process. By the time authorities investigate, the damage will be done." Daniel leaned forward. I need you to help me stop him now. Margaret was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder. There's an emergency protocol, she said finally. As an independent director, I can call for an immediate ethics review of any board member if I have evidence of misconduct. It would halt tomorrow's vote on Victoria and trigger an investigation into Richard instead. How long would that investigation take? Days? Maybe a week? Long enough to verify these documents. Margaret looked at Daniel. But if I do this, I'm putting my own reputation on the line. If these documents turn out to be fabricated or inadmissible, they're not. I stake my career on it. Margaret smiled grimly. You already are. She picked up the folder. I'll make the call tonight. The board will be notified by morning that tomorrow's meeting is postponed pending an ethics investigation into Richard Dalton. Daniel felt a wave of relief so intense he almost couldn't breathe. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Richard will fight this viciously, and when he realizes you're the source, he'll come after you with everything he has. Let him. Margaret stood, tucking the folder into her briefcase. One more question, Mr. Hayes. Why risk everything for Victoria Grant? You barely know her. Daniel thought about that night in Victoria's office, when she'd looked defeated for the first time. He thought about her telling him to go home to his daughter. He thought about every moment they'd worked together, building something that mattered. Because she believed in me when no one else did, Daniel said, and I'm not going to let her fight alone. Margaret nodded. Then I hope you're ready for war, because that's what this is about to become. That evening, Daniel sat in his apartment waiting for the fallout. Lily was asleep. The city was quiet outside his window. His phone rang at 9 p.m. Victoria. What did you do? She asked. Her voice was shaking. What do you mean? Margaret Chen just called an emergency board session for tonight. She's filed a formal ethics complaint against Richard Dalton. The vote on my leadership is postponed indefinitely. Victoria's voice cracked. Daniel, what did you do? I found proof that Richard's been sabotaging the company. I gave it to Margaret. Silence. Then quietly. How? I had help. But Victoria, the evidence is solid. Financial records, emails, everything. Richard's been working with Meridian Capital to devalue Grant Media so he could profit from a sale. He manufactured the entire ethics investigation against you. You can prove this? Margaret thinks so. There's a reporter at the Tribune who's going to publish the story tomorrow. More silence. Victoria? Daniel said. Are you okay? When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. You risked your career for me. You did the same for me. That was different. I was your boss. I had power to protect you. You were also alone, and you needed someone in your corner. Daniel paused. I wasn't going to let Richard destroy you with lies. He heard Victoria take a shaky breath. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Daniel, She stopped, started again. I need to see you. Now? Now. 20 minutes later, Daniel stood outside Victoria's apartment building in an upscale neighborhood he'd never been to before. She buzzed him up without a word. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt eternal. Victoria opened the door before he could knock. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, the most casual he'd ever seen her. Her hair was down. She looked younger, vulnerable, human. Come in, she said. Her apartment was immaculate and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But Daniel barely noticed the space. He was focused on Victoria. She closed the door and turned to face him. I spent the last hour on the phone with Margaret and 2 other board members, Victoria said. They've reviewed your evidence. They're calling for Richard's immediate suspension pending a full investigation. The FBI might get involved. That's good. It's more than good. Victoria's composure finally cracked. You saved me. You saved the company. You saved everything. Daniel stepped closer. I couldn't let him win. You barely knew me 6 weeks ago. You didn't owe me this. Yes, I did. Victoria looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Why? Daniel struggled to find words for something he'd been trying not to acknowledge for weeks. Because working with you made me remember what it feels like to care about something bigger than survival. Because you saw something in me I'd forgotten was there. Because he stopped. Victoria was standing inches away now, looking up at him with an expression he'd never seen before. Open, uncertain, waiting. Because what? She whispered. The truth came out before Daniel could stop it. Because I'm falling for you, he said. And I know that's completely inappropriate and professionally disastrous, and probably the worst timing in history, but it's the truth. I'm falling for you, and I couldn't watch someone destroy you without fighting back. Victoria's breath caught. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like neither of them quite believed it was happening. But then Victoria's hands were in his hair and Daniel's arms were around her waist, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and honest and long overdue. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "I know. You work for me. There are policies, protocols. I know. If we do this, everything becomes more complicated. I know." Daniel pulled back just enough to look at her. "But I'm done pretending I don't feel this. I'm done acting like working late together was just about work. I'm done lying to myself." Victoria's eyes searched his face. "If we're going to do this, if we're going to try, we have to do it right. No hiding, no shortcuts. We follow every policy, disclose everything, accept whatever consequences come." "Agreed. I'll have to transfer you to a different department. We can't have a reporting relationship." "I understand. The board will scrutinize us. People will talk. It won't be easy." Daniel smiled. "Nothing worth having ever is." Victoria kissed him again, softer this time. "I'm terrified," she admitted against his lips. "Me too. But I'm also—" She stopped, searching for words. "For the first time in years, I'm not just fighting, I'm hoping." Daniel held her close, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through and everything they were about to face. Tomorrow, the board would convene. Richard would be suspended. The investigation would begin. The media would descend. Their relationship would be exposed and examined and judged. But tonight, in this quiet moment, none of that mattered. Tonight, they were just two people who'd found each other in the middle of a storm. And for now, that was enough. Daniel left Victoria's apartment just before midnight, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. The kiss, the confession, the promise that they would do this right, no matter how complicated it became. He took the train home through the quiet city, watching his reflection in the dark window. Everything had changed in a single evening. The investigation he'd launched would expose Richard's corruption, but it would also expose his relationship with Victoria to scrutiny that neither of them could control. When he got home, Mrs. Chen was asleep on his couch. He'd texted her hours ago to stay with Lily, not knowing how long he'd be. He gently woke her and thanked her, slipping her extra money that she initially refused but eventually accepted. After she left, Daniel checked on Lily. She was sleeping peacefully, clutching her stuffed elephant. He kissed her forehead and whispered a promise he hoped he could keep. "I'm going to make everything okay." But sleep didn't come easily that night. Daniel lay awake thinking about what tomorrow would bring. The board meeting, the investigation. The moment when he and Victoria would have to stand in front of everyone and admit the truth about their relationship. He told Victoria he was ready for the consequences. But was he really? His phone buzzed at 6 a.m. A text from Jennifer Chen at the Tribune. "Jennifer, story goes live at 9 a.m. Board's been notified. Hope you're ready for this." Daniel sat up in bed, his heart already racing. There was no going back now. He got Lily ready for school, made her breakfast, and walked her to the bus stop like it was any other Tuesday. She chattered about a field trip coming up, oblivious to the fact that her father's entire professional life was about to implode. "You seem happier today, Daddy," Lily observed as they waited for the bus. Daniel smiled. "I am happier." "Why?" "Because I did something hard that needed to be done, and I'm not hiding anymore." Lily frowned, trying to understand. "Hiding from what?" "From the truth." Daniel knelt down to her level. "Sometimes we're scared to be honest because we think people won't understand. But being honest is always better than pretending." The bus pulled up. Lily hugged him tight. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart." As the bus pulled away, Daniel's phone rang. Victoria. Are you on your way to the office? She asked. Leaving now. Daniel, there's something you need to know before you get here. Victoria's voice was tense. Richard showed up at the building an hour ago. Security had to escort him out. He's threatening lawsuits against the board, against me, and against you personally. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. On what grounds? Defamation, theft of confidential information, corporate espionage. He's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. She paused. He knows you're the one who exposed him. Let him come after me. The evidence speaks for itself. It's not that simple. Richard's lawyers are claiming the emails were obtained illegally. If they can prove that, everything you found could be inadmissible. Daniel's blood went cold. Paula accessed the financial records for me. If they go after her, they're already threatening to. Richard's legal team sent a cease and desist letter to her at 5 a.m. Victoria's voice softened. Daniel, this is going to get ugly. People are going to get hurt. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Daniel thought about Paula, who'd risked her job to help him. He thought about the entire company that Richard had been bleeding dry for years. He thought about Victoria, who'd been fighting alone until now. I'm sure, he said. We finished this. When Daniel arrived at Grant Media headquarters, the building felt different. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering. Phones were ringing constantly. Security had been doubled at the entrance. The Tribune story had gone live at 9 a.m., exactly as Jennifer promised. Daniel pulled it up on his phone as he rode the elevator to his floor. The headline read, Board member accused of sabotaging Chicago media company for personal profit. The article was thorough, detailed, and devastating. It outlined Richard's financial ties to Meridian Capital, the suspicious timing of Grant Media's lost accounts, the payments to his consulting firm, and the emails showing deliberate sabotage. It even mentioned the manufactured ethics investigation against Victoria. By the time Daniel reached his desk, the article had already been shared thousands of times on social media. Paula appeared at his cubicle within minutes, her face pale. They're saying I stole confidential information, she said, her voice shaking. Richard's lawyers are threatening criminal charges. You were helping uncover fraud. That's whistleblower protection, not theft. His lawyers don't see it that way. Paula sat down heavily. Daniel, I have student loans. I can't afford a legal battle. What if I lose my job? What if I get prosecuted? Daniel felt guilt crash over him. He'd asked Paula to take this risk, and now she was facing the consequences. I'll get you a lawyer, he said. The best one we can find. I'll pay for it myself if I have to. You can't afford that either. Then we'll figure something out. But Paula, you did the right thing. Don't let Richard's threats make you doubt that. Paula looked at him with tears in her eyes. I hope you're right. At 10 a.m., Daniel was summoned to the executive floor. Not to Victoria's office, but to the main boardroom. When he entered, he found Victoria already there, along with Margaret Chen and two other board members he recognized but had never met. A woman in her 50s wearing an expensive suit stood by the windows, clearly a lawyer. Mr. Hayes, Margaret said, gesturing to a chair. Please sit. This is Rebecca Torres, the company's general counsel. She has some questions about how you obtained the evidence against Richard Dalton. Daniel sat, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. Rebecca Torres didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Hayes, did you personally access confidential financial records without authorization? No, I researched publicly available information, SEC filings, corporate records, news articles. What about the internal payment records showing money transferred to Richard Dalton's consulting firm? Daniel hesitated. Those were provided to me by a colleague who had legitimate access. Paula Martinez? I'm not going to confirm names. Mr. Hayes, we're trying to protect you and anyone else involved, but if Richard's lawyers can prove the information was obtained illegally, it won't matter how damning it is. Rebecca leaned forward. So I need you to be completely honest. How did you get those payment records? Daniel looked at Victoria. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Paula Martinez accessed the records using her normal system credentials, Daniel said. She has authorization to view financial data as part of her role in strategic analysis. She didn't hack anything or steal anything. She used information she already had access to. Rebecca made notes. And the emails? The ones showing Richard coordinating with his business partner to sabotage the company? Those came from a journalist who has protected sources. I can't speak to how she obtained them. The journalist being Jennifer Chen from the Tribune? Yes. Rebecca exchanged glances with Margaret. Richard's lawyers are going to argue that those emails were obtained through illegal hacking or interception. Then they'll have to prove it, Daniel said. Jennifer Chen has a reputation for protecting her sources. Good luck getting her to reveal them. One of the other board members, an older man named Douglas Freeman, spoke up. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate what you've done, but you've put this company in a very difficult position. Richard is threatening to sue for damages that could bankrupt us. He's claiming the Tribune article destroyed his reputation based on stolen information. His reputation deserved to be destroyed. He committed fraud. Perhaps. But proving that in court while defending against his lawsuits could take years and cost millions. Douglas looked genuinely troubled. The board is considering a settlement. Daniel felt his blood run cold. A settlement? He sabotaged this company for years, and you want to pay him to go away? We want to protect the company from protracted legal warfare, Douglas said. If we settle quietly, Richard drops his lawsuits, resigns from the board, and this all goes away. Except it doesn't go away, Victoria said sharply. It sends a message that board members can commit fraud without real consequences. It tells our employees that corruption is tolerated as long as it's expensive to prosecute. Margaret Chen raised a hand. I agree with Victoria. We can't settle this. But Douglas has a point about the legal exposure. Richard's lawyers are very good, and they're going to make this painful. Rebecca Torres cleared her throat. There's another complication. Mr. Hayes, Richard's legal team has also made allegations about your relationship with Ms. Grant. They're claiming that your investigation into Richard was motivated by personal loyalty rather than company interests. Daniel had known this was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. My relationship with Victoria Grant began last night, he said carefully. Long after I'd already uncovered the evidence against Richard. The investigation had nothing to do with personal feelings. But you do have personal feelings for Ms. Grant. Daniel looked directly at Victoria. She met his eyes, her expression unreadable. Yes, he said. I do. The room went silent. Rebecca made more notes. Ms. Grant, is this relationship mutual? Victoria's voice was steady. Yes, it is. Douglas Freeman sighed heavily. This is exactly the kind of complication we don't need right now. With respect, Douglas, my personal life is not a complication, Victoria said coldly. It's also not relevant to Richard's fraud. It's relevant to the optics. Richard will use this to claim you promoted Mr. Hayes inappropriately, that he was protecting you out of romantic interest, that the whole investigation is tainted by personal bias. Then let him make that claim, Victoria said. It doesn't change the facts. Richard took money from competitors. He sabotaged company accounts. He conspired to force a sale that would have profited him personally. None of that has anything to do with my relationship with Daniel. Margaret Chen nodded slowly. Victoria's right. We need to separate these issues. Richard's misconduct stands on its own merits. Whatever relationship exists between Victoria and Mr. Hayes is a separate HR matter that we'll address through proper channels. What does that mean? Daniel asked. It means you can't continue reporting to Ms. Grant, Margaret said. You'll need to transfer to a different division under a different supervisor. You and Ms. Grant will need to disclose your relationship formally to HR, and there will likely be scrutiny from the board about whether the relationship influenced any business decisions. It didn't, Daniel said firmly. We'll need to verify that through review of the Apex campaign and any other projects you worked on together. Margaret looked at both of them. Are you both willing to undergo that review? Daniel and Victoria answered simultaneously. Yes. Rebecca Torres stood. Then here's what's going to happen. The board will continue its investigation into Richard Dalton's conduct. Mr. Hayes, you and Ms. Martinez will need to give formal depositions about how you obtained the evidence. Ms. Grant, you'll need to recuse yourself from any board discussions about Richard since you're personally involved in the allegations. Understood, Victoria said. And both of you need to prepare for this to get very public and very messy. Richard's not going down without a fight. After the meeting, Daniel and Victoria walked out of the boardroom together, but maintained careful distance. The entire office was watching them now, and every gesture would be analyzed. Victoria stopped at the elevator. "My office. 5 minutes. We need to talk." Daniel nodded and waited until she'd left before following. When he entered Victoria's office, she was standing at the windows with her arms crossed, staring out at the city. "Close the door," she said. Daniel did. Victoria turned to face him. "This is what I was afraid of, the relationship becoming ammunition. We knew it would. Knowing it and living it are different things." Victoria's voice was strained. "Douglas is right about one thing. This makes everything more complicated. Richard's lawyers are going to dig into every interaction we've ever had, every email, every meeting, every decision. They're going to try to prove I gave you special treatment. You didn't. I gave you the Apex campaign on your first day back after that text message. How does that look?" Daniel stepped closer. "It looks like you made a smart business decision that paid off. We won the account. The client is happy. The company benefited. But did I give you that project because you were the best person for it? Or because I was already feeling something for you and didn't want to admit it?" Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "I've been asking myself that question for weeks. What's your answer?" Victoria met his eyes. "I don't know anymore." The admission hung between them. "Victoria," Daniel said softly, "you're the most principled person I know. If you gave me that project for the wrong reasons, you'd never forgive yourself. The fact that you're questioning it now tells me you made the right choice then." "Does it? Or am I just good at rationalizing my decisions?" "You're being too hard on yourself." "Am I?" Victoria's voice rose slightly. "Because from where I'm standing, I've fallen for someone who works for me. I've put his career at risk. I've given Richard ammunition to destroy both of us, and I'm questioning every professional decision I've made in the past 6 weeks." Daniel closed the distance between them. "Then let me give you some clarity. You gave me the Apex project because you saw talent that was being wasted. You pushed me hard because you knew I could deliver. You defended me during the investigation because the accusations were false. None of that had anything to do with personal feelings. How can you be sure?" "Because I know you. You wouldn't compromise your integrity for anyone, including me." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, then closed her eyes. "I'm scared, Daniel. I'm scared that I've made a terrible mistake. I'm scared that I'm going to lose everything I've built. I'm scared that you're going to get destroyed because of me." Daniel pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him. "We're going to get through this," he said quietly. "Together." "You keep saying that. But what if we don't?" "Then at least we tried. At least we were honest." Daniel pulled back to look at her. "I'm not afraid of what comes next. The only thing I'm afraid of is losing you before we even have a chance." Victoria's eyes were wet. "I'm not worth all this." "Yes, you are." She kissed him then, soft and desperate and full of fear. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "We have to be so careful," she whispered. "No mistakes, no slip-ups. We have to prove that this relationship didn't influence anything." "We will. And you have to transfer divisions, today. No more working together directly." "Where will I go?" "Digital strategy. They need a creative lead, and you're qualified." "It's a lateral move, same salary, but you'll report to James Chen instead of me." Daniel nodded. "Okay. And we have to disclose everything to HR immediately." "I'll do it this afternoon." Victoria stepped back, rebuilding her armor. "Then we do this by the book. No shortcuts. No exceptions." "Agreed." She walked back to her desk and pulled out a form. "This is the relationship disclosure paperwork. Fill it out completely. Be honest about when the relationship started, the nature of it, everything." Daniel took the form. "What about us? Outside of work?" Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Outside of work, we figure it out as we go. But inside this building, we're colleagues, nothing more." "That's going to be hard." "Everything about this is going to be hard." Victoria looked at him. "Are you sure you want to do this? Because there's still time to walk away. Say it was a mistake. Pretend last night didn't happen." Daniel met her eyes. "I don't want to pretend anything. I want to fight for this. For us. Even if it costs you everything?" "Even then." Victoria nodded slowly. "Then we fight." The next week was the hardest of Daniel's life. He transferred to the digital strategy division and tried to adjust to a new team, new projects, and a boss who viewed him with suspicion. James Chen was professional but cold, clearly aware that Daniel's transfer was the result of a relationship disclosure rather than career ambition. The investigation into Richard Dalton intensified. Federal prosecutors got involved, examining the financial records and emails. Richard's lawyers fought back viciously, filing motions to suppress evidence and attacking the credibility of everyone involved. Paula was interviewed 3 times by investigators. Each time she came back to the office looking more exhausted and afraid. Daniel tried to support her, but he was dealing with his own depositions and legal interviews. The media coverage was relentless. Business publications ran articles about corporate fraud at Grant Media. Industry blogs speculated about Victoria's future. Social media lit up with opinions about whether the relationship between Victoria and Daniel had compromised the company's integrity. Through it all, Daniel barely saw Victoria. They maintained strict professional distance at work, communicating only through necessary emails and scheduled meetings that always included other people. But at night, when the office was empty and the scrutiny eased, they found moments. They met at quiet restaurants far from downtown. They took walks along the lake where no one from work would see them. They talked on the phone late at night when Lily was asleep. And slowly, carefully, they built something real in the spaces between the chaos. One evening, 3 weeks after the investigation began, Daniel got a call from Margaret Chen. "The board has made a decision about Richard," she said. "Can you come to the office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.? I'll be there." The next morning, Daniel arrived to find the boardroom filled with nearly everyone who'd been involved in the investigation. Victoria was there, along with Paula, several other board members, Rebecca Torres, and Margaret Chen. Margaret stood at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I wanted to share the board's decision in person rather than through formal channels." She paused. After reviewing all the evidence, consulting with federal prosecutors, and examining 3 years of financial records, the board has voted unanimously to terminate Richard Dalton's position, effective immediately. Additionally, we're pursuing civil charges to recover the money he took from the company through his fraudulent consulting fees. Daniel felt a wave of relief so intense he almost couldn't breathe. Federal prosecutors have also filed criminal charges, Margaret continued. Wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Richard will likely face prison time if convicted. Paula let out a small sob of relief. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. "I want to be clear about something," Margaret said, looking directly at Daniel and Paula. "What you both did, exposing this corruption, took courage. You risked your careers to protect this company. The board recognizes that, and we're grateful." Douglas Freeman spoke up. "We're also implementing new oversight procedures to ensure this never happens again. Independent audits of all board member financial relationships, stricter conflict of interest policies, whistleblower protections for employees who report misconduct." "What about the investigation into Victoria and me?" Daniel asked. Rebecca Torres answered. "The board has reviewed the Apex campaign development process, all communications between you and Ms. Grant, and the timeline of your relationship. We found no evidence that Ms. Grant's professional decisions were influenced by personal bias. The relationship began after the major project decisions had been made, and all decisions can be justified by legitimate business reasons." Daniel felt Victoria's relief from across the table. "However," Rebecca continued, "the relationship still represents a potential conflict of interest, which is why the transfer to digital strategy was necessary and why both of you will remain under heightened scrutiny for the foreseeable future." "We understand," Victoria said. Margaret Chen smiled slightly. "That said, you're both cleared to continue in your current roles. No disciplinary action, no formal reprimand. You disclosed the relationship appropriately and you're following all policies." The meeting wrapped up shortly after, but as people filed out, Margaret asked Daniel and Victoria to stay. When the room was empty, Margaret closed the door. "I want to give you both some advice," she said. "What you have, this relationship, it's going to be scrutinized for a long time. People are going to question your judgment. They're going to assume things. They're going to make it harder than it needs to be." "We know," Victoria said. "But here's the thing. I've been in corporate leadership for 30 years. I've seen a lot of relationships crash and burn because people weren't honest about them. They hid, they lied, they made excuses. Margaret looked at both of them.
You two did the opposite. You were honest even when it was painful. You followed the rules even when it was inconvenient. That matters. Thank you, Daniel said. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. Be honest, be transparent, and don't let other people's opinions define what this is. Margaret opened the door. Now get back to work, both of you. That evening, Daniel picked up Lily from school and took her to the park.
It was the first time in weeks that he'd been able to leave work at a reasonable hour, and the autumn air felt like freedom. Lily ran ahead to the swings, her backpack bouncing. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Victoria, the board cleared us. It's over. Daniel, I heard. How are you feeling? Victoria, exhausted, relieved, terrified, all of it. Daniel, want to talk later? Victoria, actually, I was wondering if I could meet someone. Daniel, who? Victoria, your daughter, if you're ready for that. Daniel's heart stopped. He looked at Lily on the swings, laughing and carefree. This was the next step, the step that made everything real. He typed back slowly. Daniel, are you sure? That's a big deal. Victoria, I'm sure. If you are. Daniel watched Lily for another moment. She deserved honesty. She deserved to know the truth about the person who'd become so important in his life. Daniel, Saturday, lunch, somewhere casual. Victoria, I'll be there. Saturday arrived bright and cold. Daniel had explained to Lily that morning that they were meeting someone special for lunch, a friend from work who'd become important to him. Lily had asked the question he'd been dreading. Is she your girlfriend? Daniel had knelt down to her level and been honest. Maybe. We're figuring that out. But I wanted you to meet her because what you think matters to me. Lily had considered this seriously. What if I don't like her? Then we'll talk about it. Your opinion matters, sweetheart. They met Victoria at a family-friendly restaurant near the lake. Victoria arrived early, looking nervous in jeans and a sweater, dressed down in a way Daniel had rarely seen. When Lily saw her, she went shy, hiding partially behind Daniel's legs. Victoria smiled gently. Hi, Lily. I'm Victoria. Your dad has told me a lot about you. Lily peeked out. He talks about you too. Does he? He says you're really smart and kind of scary sometimes. Victoria laughed. A real genuine laugh that made her look years younger. I can be scary sometimes, usually when people aren't doing their best work. They sat down, and the first few minutes were awkward. But then Victoria asked Lily about school, and Lily started talking about her favorite books. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, treating Lily like a person worth taking seriously. By the end of lunch, Lily was showing Victoria drawings she'd made in art class, and Victoria was telling Lily about a book she thought Lily might like. When they finally said goodbye, Lily hugged Victoria shyly. On the walk home, Daniel asked the question that had been burning in his mind. So, what did you think? Lily was quiet for a moment. She's different than I expected. Different how? I thought she'd be all businessy and serious, but she's kind of nice. Oh, Lily looked up at him. Do you love her? Daniel stopped walking. The question was so direct, so innocent, so important. I think I might, he said honestly. Is that okay? Lily thought about it. Does she make you happy? She does? Then it's okay. Lily took his hand. But Daddy, don't forget about me when you're with her. Daniel's heart broke and healed at the same time. He knelt down and pulled Lily into a tight hug. Never, he whispered. You're always first. Always. That night, after Lily was asleep, Victoria came over to Daniel's apartment for the first time. It was small and cluttered compared to her pristine place, but she didn't seem to care. They sat on the couch together, and Daniel told her about Lily's question. She asked if I loved you, he said. Victoria tensed. What did you say? I said I think I might. Victoria was silent for a long moment, then quietly. I think I might too. Daniel turned to look at her. Yeah? Yeah? Victoria's voice was soft, vulnerable.
I didn't think I was capable of this anymore. After years of building walls and keeping people at distance. But you got through anyway. Daniel pulled her close. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. Victoria echoed his words from weeks ago. But I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of pretending I don't need anyone. I'm tired of sacrificing everything for a career that was making me miserable. What do you want instead? Victoria looked at him with tears in her eyes. I want this. Whatever this becomes, I want to build something real with you. They kissed then, and it felt different than before. Less desperate, more certain, like they were finally letting themselves believe this could actually work. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria rested her head on his shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. Not the CEO. Not the Ice Queen. Just me. Daniel held her tighter. Always. Outside the window, the city lights flickered against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Richard Dalton was facing criminal charges. The company was healing, the investigation was over. And here, in this small apartment, two people who'd found each other in the middle of chaos were finally letting themselves hope for something more. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And that was enough. The weeks that followed were a study in careful balance. Daniel threw himself into his new role in digital strategy, determined to prove that his transfer wasn't just a convenient solution to a complicated problem, but a genuine opportunity for growth. The team was skeptical at first, viewing him as the guy who dated the CEO, and somehow avoided getting fired. But Daniel let his work speak for itself. He led a complete overhaul of the company's social media strategy, shifting from generic corporate messaging to authentic storytelling that highlighted real employees and real projects. Within a month, engagement rates had tripled. Within 2 months, 3 potential clients had reached out specifically because they'd been impressed by the company's digital presence. James Chen, his new supervisor, gradually warmed to him. One afternoon, James stopped by Daniel's desk with an unexpected observation. "You're good at this," James said bluntly. "Better than I expected." Daniel looked up from his laptop. "Thank you. I'll be honest, when you transferred to my team, I thought you were getting special treatment, landing here because of your relationship with Victoria." James crossed his arms. "But you've earned your place. The social campaign work is solid. The client engagement metrics are impressive. You're not coasting on anyone's reputation." "I appreciate that," James nodded. "Just keep doing what you're doing. And Daniel, I don't care who you're dating as long as you deliver results." It was a small validation, but it meant everything. Victoria, meanwhile, was rebuilding the company's reputation and internal culture. The scandal with Richard had shaken employee confidence, and she knew that trust had to be earned back through action, not words. She implemented the new oversight procedures the board had mandated, but went further. She created an anonymous ethics hotline where employees could report concerns without fear of retaliation. She instituted quarterly town halls where anyone could ask her questions directly. She published the company's financial performance transparently, showing exactly where money was going and why. Slowly, the culture began to shift. People started believing that leadership actually cared about integrity, but the scrutiny on Victoria and Daniel's relationship never fully disappeared. Colleagues watched them carefully during company meetings. People analyzed their interactions, looking for signs of favoritism or inappropriate behavior. The rumor mill never quite stopped churning. They handled it by being boringly professional at work. No private conversations in hallways. No lingering glances across conference rooms. No special treatment of any kind. When they needed to communicate about company matters, they did it through official channels with other people copied. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. Outside of work was different. That's where they built their actual relationship, away from corporate policies and watchful eyes. Victoria started joining Daniel and Lily for weekend activities. At first it was just lunch or a movie. Then it became trips to museums, walks through the botanical gardens, lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes in Daniel's small kitchen. Lily warmed to Victoria gradually, testing boundaries and asking questions with the directness only children possess. "Why don't you have kids?" Lily asked one Saturday afternoon while they were at the park. Victoria didn't flinch at the question.
She sat down on the bench next to Lily while Daniel pushed a younger kid on the swings nearby. I always thought I would someday, Victoria said honestly, but I spent so much time building my career that I never found the right person to build a family with. Until recently. Lily considered this. Do you want kids now? I want to be part of your life, Victoria said carefully, if that's okay with you. Like a stepmom? Maybe, eventually, if that's something you'd want. Lily swung her legs, thinking, my real mom died. I don't really remember her much. Victoria's heart broke at the casual way Lily said it. Your dad's told me about her. She sounds like she was an amazing person. Daddy says I have her smile. Lily looked up at Victoria. Would it be okay if I liked you even though I'm supposed to miss her? Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Oh, sweetheart, you can love both. Missing your mom and caring about me aren't opposites. Your heart is big enough for both. Lily nodded slowly, then surprised Victoria by leaning against her shoulder. They sat like that for several minutes, watching Daniel play with the other children, neither of them needing to say anything more. When Daniel joined them later and saw Lily comfortable against Victoria's side, he caught Victoria's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She mouthed back, "Always." 3 months after the investigation concluded, Richard Dalton's criminal trial began. Daniel and Paula were both called to testify. The prosecutors walked them through how they discovered the evidence, the payment records, the emails, the pattern of sabotage. Richard's defense attorneys tried to discredit them, suggesting they'd manufactured evidence to protect Victoria's position. But the financial records spoke for themselves. The emails were authenticated by digital forensics experts. The timeline was irrefutable. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Richard Dalton was found guilty on all counts: wire fraud, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and ordered to pay back $12 million to Grant Media. When the verdict was read, Daniel sat in the courtroom gallery next to Paula. She grabbed his hand and squeezed hard. "We did it," she whispered. "We did it," Daniel agreed. Victoria wasn't in the courtroom. Her lawyers had advised against it to avoid any appearance of vindictiveness. But when Daniel texted her the verdict, her response was immediate. "Victoria, justice. Finally." Daniel, "Are you okay?" Victoria, "I will be. Come over tonight?" Daniel, "Lily has a sleepover at her friend's house. I'll be there at 7. That evening, Daniel arrived at Victoria's apartment to find candles lit and soft music playing. Victoria was in the kitchen, attempting to cook, which was both endearing and slightly concerning given her admitted lack of culinary skills. "What are you making?" Daniel asked, kissing her hello. "Attempting to make pasta carbonara. Emphasis on attempting." Victoria gestured at the stove where something was definitely burning. Daniel gently moved her aside and took over. "Let me help before you set off the smoke alarm." They cooked together, laughing when Victoria accidentally added salt instead of sugar to the salad dressing, salvaging the meal through teamwork. By the time they sat down to eat, the food was actually good, and the kitchen was only mildly destroyed. "I wanted tonight to be special," Victoria admitted over dinner. The trial ending, Richard going to prison, all of it finally being over. "I wanted to celebrate." "This is perfect," Daniel said. "Even though I almost poisoned you?" "Especially because you almost poisoned you. It means you're trying." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "That means everything." Victoria looked down at their joined hands. "I spent so many years thinking I had to be perfect. The perfect executive, the perfect leader. No weaknesses, no vulnerabilities, no room for anything that wasn't about work. And now? Now I'm sitting in my apartment with a man I love, having burned dinner, and I've never been happier." She looked up at him. "You changed everything for me, Daniel. You showed me that being human isn't a weakness. You did the same for me. Before you, I was just surviving, working to pay bills, raising Lily alone, going through the motions. You reminded me what it feels like to actually build something meaningful." Victoria stood and walked around the table to sit in Daniel's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you," she said simply. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you completely." Daniel kissed her softly. "I love you too." They stayed like that for a long time,
just holding each other, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through and everything they'd overcome. Later that night, lying in bed together, Victoria brought up something she'd been thinking about for weeks. "I want to meet her," she said quietly. Daniel knew immediately who she meant. "My mother-in-law? Sarah's mom?" "Yes. I know she's been an important part of Lily's life. I don't want to replace Sarah's memory or push anyone out. But if this is going to work long-term, I should meet the people who matter to you and Lily." Daniel propped himself up on one elbow. "That's a big step." "I know, but I'm ready for big steps." Victoria turned to face him. "Are you?" Daniel thought about it.
His mother-in-law, Patricia, had been a lifeline after Sarah died. She'd helped with Lily, provided emotional support, kept Sarah's memory alive. She'd also been protective, worried that Daniel would move on too quickly or replace her daughter in Lily's life. "She might not react well at first," Daniel warned. "She loved Sarah fiercely. She might see you as a threat. Then we'll work through it. Together." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Okay, I'll call her tomorrow." The meeting was arranged for the following Sunday. Patricia came to Daniel's apartment for lunch, and Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders the moment she saw Victoria there. Patricia was in her early 60s, with Sarah's same curly hair gone silver. She hugged Lily tight, then turned to Victoria with a polite but guarded smile. "So you're the famous Victoria," Patricia said. "I am. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Foster. Daniel and Lily have told me so much about you." "I'm sure they have." Patricia's tone was neutral, carefully controlled. Lunch was awkward at first. Patricia asked polite questions about Victoria's work, her background, her intentions. Victoria answered honestly, not trying to oversell herself or make promises she couldn't keep. Then Lily, oblivious to the tension, asked Patricia to tell the story about when Sarah was little and tried to give their dog a haircut. Patricia's face softened as she told the story. Victoria laughed at all the right moments, asked genuine questions, showed real interest in learning about the woman who'd been such an important part of Daniel's life. After lunch, while Daniel and Lily cleaned up the kitchen, Victoria and Patricia sat on the couch together. Daniel could hear their conversation from the other room. "I want you to know something," Victoria said quietly. "I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I know I never could. She was Lily's mother, Daniel's first love, your daughter. That's irreplaceable." Patricia's voice was thick with emotion. "Then what are you trying to do?" "I'm trying to love the family she left behind. I'm trying to be someone who honors what she built, rather than erasing it." Victoria paused. "Daniel told me Sarah made him promise not to be alone forever, that she wanted him to find happiness again. She did say that. Near the end, when she knew she didn't have much time." Patricia wiped her eyes. "She made me promise too. Promise I wouldn't make Daniel feel guilty if he moved on. And are you keeping that promise?" Patricia laughed sadly. "I'm trying. It's harder than I thought it would be. Seeing another woman in his life, in Lily's life. Part of me wants to hold on to Sarah forever." "You can hold on to her and still make room for something new," Victoria said gently. "They're not mutually exclusive." Patricia looked at Victoria for a long moment. "You really love them, don't you?" "More than I knew I was capable of." Sarah would have liked that. She always said Daniel deserved someone who saw how special he was. Patricia reached over and squeezed Victoria's hand. "I think she would have liked you." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "That means everything to me." When Patricia left that afternoon, she hugged Victoria goodbye. It wasn't the warm embrace of instant family, but it was a beginning. As the months passed, their unconventional family found its rhythm. Victoria and Daniel maintained strict professional boundaries at work, but built a deep partnership outside of it. They alternated whose apartment they stayed at, gradually merging their lives while giving Lily stability and consistency. Lily started calling Victoria by her first name rather than Ms. Grant, which felt like progress. She asked Victoria for help with homework, invited her to school events, and slowly began to see her as a permanent fixture rather than a temporary visitor. The company thrived under Victoria's renewed leadership. The Apex campaign expanded into a multi-year partnership. 3 new major clients signed on, drawn by the company's reputation for integrity and creative excellence. Employee satisfaction scores reached their highest levels in a decade. Daniel's work in digital strategy earned him a promotion to Senior Creative Director, a position he earned through merit and performance. No one questioned whether he deserved it. His results spoke for themselves. One evening in late spring, nearly a year after the accidental text message that started everything, Victoria arrived at Daniel's apartment looking nervous. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. Daniel's heart jumped. "That sounds serious." "It is. Come sit." They sat on the couch together, and Victoria pulled out her phone. She opened an email and handed it to Daniel. It was a job offer, CEO position at a major media company in New York, double her current salary, significant equity stake, a chance to lead an organization 3 times the size of Grant Media. Daniel's stomach dropped. "New York. I know. That's a huge opportunity." "It is." "When did this come in?" 3 days ago. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." Victoria took the phone back. They want an answer by the end of the week. Daniel felt his world tilting. "What do you want to do?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "A year ago, I would have accepted immediately, no question. The chance to lead a bigger company, to prove myself on a larger stage, to build something even more significant. It's everything I thought I wanted. But now? Now I have something I didn't have a year ago. I have you. I have Lily. I have a life outside of work that actually matters to me." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "And the thought of leaving that behind makes me physically ill." Daniel pulled her close. "Victoria, I would never ask you to turn down an opportunity like this for me." "You're not asking. I'm choosing." She pulled back to look at him. "The job is incredible, but it would mean uprooting everything. Moving to a city where I don't know anyone, starting over professionally and personally. Being away from you and Lily, or asking you both to give up your entire lives to follow me." "What if we did?" Daniel said quietly. Victoria blinked. "What?" "What if we came with you, Lily and me? What if we moved to New York?" "Daniel, that's insane. Your whole life is here. Lily's school, your job, Mrs. Chen, Patricia, all of it." "My whole life is you now," Daniel said firmly. "The job is just a job. I can find work in New York. Lily can make new friends. We can build a life there together." "You'd really do that?" "I'd follow you anywhere." "We'd follow you anywhere." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most romantic and most terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me." "It's also true." Victoria stood and paced to the window, looking out at the city lights. "I can't ask you to give up everything for my career." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Daniel joined her at the window. "Victoria, you spent years sacrificing everything for work. You chose the job over relationships, over happiness, over life. And then you met us, and you started choosing differently. Don't go backward now." "But this opportunity will still be a sacrifice, just a different one." Daniel turned her to face him. "Here's what I know. Whatever you choose, we'll make it work. If you want to take the New York job, we'll figure out how to move or how to make long-distance work. If you want to stay in Chicago, we'll build something here. Either way, I'm with you." Victoria searched his face. "You mean that?" "Completely." She kissed him then, hard and desperate. When they broke apart, she was crying. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "I don't want to start over somewhere else. I want to keep building what we have here." "Then stay. But the opportunity will come again. There will be other jobs, other companies, other chances to prove yourself." Daniel wiped her tears. "But there's only one now. Only one us. Don't sacrifice that for a title." Victoria laughed through her tears. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from the best." That night, Victoria declined the New York position. She sent a gracious email thanking them for the opportunity, but explaining that she'd found something in Chicago more valuable than any career advancement. A week later, she and Daniel were having dinner at her apartment when she brought up something else that had been on her mind. "I've been thinking about next steps," Victoria said carefully. "What kind of next steps?" "The kind where we stop maintaining 2 apartments and actually move in together. The kind where we stop testing whether this is going to work and commit to building something permanent." Daniel set down his fork. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Victoria smiled nervously. "I'm saying I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to help Lily with homework and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want to build a life together that's not divided between 2 places and careful scheduling." "That's a big commitment." "I know, but I'm ready for it. If you are." Daniel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Victoria's apartment had become as familiar to him as his own over the past year, but it had always been her space, not theirs. He turned back to face her. What about Lily? Have you thought about how this affects her? Every day, which is why I think we should ask her. Ask her? She's part of this family too. She deserves a say in whether we all live together. The next evening, Daniel and Victoria sat down with Lily after dinner. They explained that they'd been thinking about all living together in one place, creating a real home for all three of them. Lily listened carefully, her 7-year-old face serious. Would we live here or at our apartment? She asked. We'd find a new place, Victoria said. Somewhere that belongs to all of us equally, with a room for you that you can decorate however you want. And you'd be there every day, not just on weekends? Every day, Victoria confirmed. Lily thought about this. Would you be like my mom? Victoria glanced at Daniel, then knelt down to Lily's level. I would never try to replace your mom. No one could do that. But I would love you and take care of you and be someone you can count on. Would that be okay? Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that mattered most to her. Would Daddy be happy? Victoria felt her throat tighten. I think he would be. But what about you? Would you be happy? Lily looked at her father, then back at Victoria. I think I would be too. It's nice when you're around. The house feels less lonely. Then should we do it? Daniel asked. Should we become a real family? Lily nodded slowly. Yeah, let's do it. They found a house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools a month later. It had 3 bedrooms, a backyard, and enough space for all of them to have their own areas while still feeling connected. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Moving day was chaos. Mrs. Chen showed up with homemade food. Marcus arrived with a truck and terrible jokes. Paula came by with a housewarming gift. Patricia brought boxes of Sarah's things she thought Lily might want to keep, a gesture that moved everyone to tears. By the end of the day, surrounded by boxes and exhausted friends, Daniel stood in the backyard with Victoria while Lily explored her new room upstairs. We did it, Victoria said, leaning against him. We actually built a family. Unconventional as hell, but yeah, we did. No regrets? Daniel pulled her close. Not even one. That night, after everyone had left and Lily was asleep in her new room, Daniel and Victoria sat on the back porch watching the stars appear. I've been thinking about something, Daniel said. What's that? About how all of this started, with a stupid text message sent to the wrong person. Victoria laughed. The worst mistake that ever happened to you. Actually, the best mistake. Daniel stood and pulled Victoria to her feet. That message led to everything. The campaign, the investigation, us. All of it started because I was careless and mortified. Where are you going with this? Daniel took a deep breath. He'd been planning this moment for weeks, waiting for the right time. And somehow, standing in their new backyard under the stars, it felt perfect. He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Victoria's hands flew to her mouth. Daniel! A year ago, I sent you a message that should have ended my career. Instead, it started the most important chapter of my life. Daniel opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. You gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. You saw potential in me that I'd forgotten existed. You built a family with me when you'd spent years thinking you didn't need one. And I love you more than I ever thought possible to love another person. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face. So here's my question, Daniel continued. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the chance you gave me? Victoria dropped to her knees in front of him, framing his face with her hands. You don't have to prove anything, she said through tears. You already showed me what real partnership looks like. You fought for me when I was ready to give up. You loved me when I didn't think I deserved it. You built a home with me when I'd spent my whole life being alone. Is that a yes? Victoria laughed. Yes, you brilliant, stubborn, wonderful man. Yes, I'll marry you. Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. They were still kissing when they heard a window open upstairs. Lily's sleepy voice called down. Are you guys being romantic down there? They broke apart laughing. Daniel called up, Maybe a little. Did you ask her to marry you? I did.
Did she say yes? Victoria answered this time. I said yes. There was a pause, then Lily's excited voice. So we're really going to be a family? Like official? As official as it gets, Daniel confirmed. Cool. Can I be in the wedding? Absolutely, Victoria said. Super cool. I'm going back to sleep. Love you guys. Love you too, sweetheart. The window closed. Daniel and Victoria looked at each other and burst into laughter. That was the least romantic proposal acceptance ever, Victoria said. I don't know. I think it was perfect. Very us. They sat on the porch for another hour, talking about wedding plans and the future and all the small, beautiful details of the life they were building together. The wedding happened 6 months later on a crisp autumn afternoon. It was small and intimate, held in the backyard of their home. Marcus was the best man. Paula was Victoria's maid of honor. Lily was the flower girl, taking her role incredibly seriously. Patricia sat in the front row crying happy tears. Margaret Chen attended, along with several colleagues from Grant Media who'd become genuine friends rather than just co-workers. Even Mrs. Chen came, beaming with pride at the family she'd watched come together. Victoria wore a simple ivory dress. Daniel wore a suit he'd bought for the occasion. Lily wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself, complete with sparkly shoes she'd insisted were essential. When it came time for the vows, Daniel spoke first. Victoria, you came into my life at a moment when I'd stopped believing in second chances. You showed me that mistakes can become opportunities, that falling can lead to rising, that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing we can do. He took her hands. I promise to always be honest with you, to fight beside you instead of for you, to build a life that honors both our ambitions and our love. I promise to be the partner you deserve. Victoria's voice shook as she spoke her vows. Daniel, you taught me that success isn't measured in titles or achievements, but in the people who choose to stand beside you. You showed me that opening my heart wouldn't destroy me, it would complete me. You gave me a family when I'd convinced myself I didn't need one. She squeezed his hands. I promise to never let ambition overshadow what matters, to choose us even when it's hard, to love your daughter as fiercely as I love you. I promise to build a life where work serves our family, not the other way around. When they kissed, Lily cheered louder than anyone. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and stories from colleagues about the legendary accidental text message that had started everything. Marcus gave a toast that had everyone crying with laughter. To Daniel, who proved that sometimes the worst professional mistake of your life is actually the best thing that ever happened to you. And to Victoria, who proved that giving someone a second chance can change everything. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Daniel found himself standing in the backyard watching Victoria dance with Lily to a song playing from someone's phone. The two of them were laughing, spinning each other around, completely unself-conscious and joyful. Marcus appeared beside him. You did good, man. I got lucky. You got brave. There's a difference. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. A year ago, you were terrified of losing your job over a text message. Now, look at you. Married to the CEO, living in a house with a backyard, building a family. That didn't happen by luck. That happened because you chose to fight for what mattered. Daniel watched Victoria pick Lily up and spin her around, both of them shrieking with laughter. Best fight I ever had, he said. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Lily was asleep upstairs, Daniel and Victoria stood in their bedroom, exhausted and happy. We're married, Victoria said, still sounding slightly awed by it. We're married, Daniel confirmed. How did we get here? From that horrible text message to this? Daniel pulled her close. We got here by being honest, by taking risks, by choosing each other even when it was complicated and messy and scared the hell out of both of us. Victoria rested her head against his chest. I never thought I'd have this. A wedding, a partner, a family. I'd convinced myself that women like me didn't get both career success and personal happiness. You were wrong. Spectacularly wrong. She looked up at him. Thank you for proving that to me. Thank you for letting me. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, feeling the weight and wonder of everything they'd built. 1 year later, Daniel stood in the backyard of their home on a Saturday morning, watching Lily teach Victoria how to plant tomatoes in the garden they were building together.
The house had become a real home over the past year, filled with photos and memories and the beautiful chaos of daily life. Grant Media was thriving. Victoria's leadership had transformed it from a company on the brink of collapse to one of the most respected media firms in the region. Daniel's digital strategy division had won 3 industry awards. Paula had been promoted to senior analyst. The culture of integrity Victoria had built was now the company's defining characteristic. But the real success was here, in this backyard, watching the 2 people he loved most in the world laugh over gardening mishaps. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Marcus, still can't believe that text message led to all this. You should send Victoria another one, see what happens. Daniel smiled and typed back. Daniel, I think I'll stick with intentional messages from now on. Marcus, where's the fun in that? Daniel pocketed his phone and walked over to join Victoria and Lily in the garden. Lily immediately recruited him to help dig holes while Victoria supervised with exaggerated authority. Deeper, Victoria instructed. The roots need room. Yes, boss, Daniel said with a grin. I'm not your boss anymore, I'm your wife. There's a difference. Is there, though? Victoria threw a small clod of dirt at him. Lily dissolved into giggles. As they worked together in the morning sun, dirt under their fingernails and smiles on their faces, Daniel thought about everything that had led to this moment. The panic when he'd realized his mistake, the fear when he'd walked into Victoria's office expecting to be fired, the courage it had taken to expose Richard's corruption, the risk of admitting his feelings, the choice to build something real instead of playing it safe. Every terrifying step had been worth it, because sometimes the worst mistake of your life is actually the beginning of everything you never knew you needed. And sometimes the text message you send to the wrong person is exactly the right message sent at exactly the right time. Daniel had sent 5 words that should have destroyed his career. My boss is unbelievably hot. Instead, those 5 words had led him to a love he never thought possible, a family he'd stopped believing in, and a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. As the 3 of them finished planting the last tomato seedling and stood back to admire their work, Victoria slipped her hand into Daniel's. What are you thinking about? She asked. Daniel looked at his wife, at his daughter covered in dirt and grinning like she'd conquered the world, at the home they'd built together from chaos and courage and accidental honesty. I'm thinking about how sometimes the most dangerous accident in your life turns out to be the beginning of the future you never thought you deserved. Victoria squeezed his hand. And I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Lily tugged on both their hands. Can we make lunch now? I'm starving. They headed inside together, the 3 of them, a family built from mistakes and second chances and the brave choice to fight for what mattered most. Behind them, the garden waited patiently to grow. And ahead of them, a whole life stretched out full of possibility, built on the foundation of one accidental text message and the courage to see where honesty could lead. It wasn't the life Daniel had planned. It wasn't the life Victoria had expected, but it was the life they'd chosen together. And that made all the difference.